Jack Carter hung on the edge of consciousness, the world around him a blur of shadows and pain. He had been thrown to the dirt by a blast, and now lay sprawled face down in cold mud. He could taste blood and earth in his mouth. Water dripped steadily from shattered leaves overhead, hitting his helmet with staccato taps. A thick wind smelled of smoke and wet earth, swirling in the clearing. The air carried distant cracks of rifle fire and faint screams. Every breath Jack drew was a ragged gasp. Each heartbeat echoed loudly in his ears. His right shoulder burned fiercely, and his ribs felt on fire with each exhale. The wet muzzle of his rifle dug into his side, pinning him to the ground. Jagged branches and snapped twigs jutted up around him like broken teeth in the mud. Thunder rumbled overhead, sending lightning jagged across the sky. A crow cawed somewhere high in the trees, curious and casual in the midst of the chaos. It seemed absurd, and Jack managed the faintest of a laugh. He was alive. That was certain. He forced himself to breathe. He had to hold on. Long seconds passed before he dared to blink, letting his eyes adjust to the gray light. He could see soldiers moving around him, giving orders, their uniforms soaked from rain. Distant bodies lay still, hidden by shadows and tall grass. He did not know how long he had been down here. Each second felt like an eternity. The voices were distant and underwater at first. For a moment, Jack could have been anywhere, hearing a friendly slap on the shoulder, a father saying he believed in him. Then the cold, hard world rushed back around him. A voice, urgent, desperate, cut through the chaos. "Medic! Medic!" Jack managed to lift his head enough to see a figure in a drenched uniform kneeling at his side. The man's hands were quickly checking Jack's shoulder and ribs for wounds, pressing tight bandages onto torn flesh. A battered med pack lay open on the ground next to him, its tools scattered in the mud. "Hang in there, buddy," the medic grunted softly. He applied pressure with a shaking hand to Jack's broken ribs, each squeeze sending fresh agony through Jack's body. The medic's voice was steady, but laced with fear, worry etched on his face. Jack tried to squeeze the medic's fingers, but a bolt of pain shot up his arm and stole his breath. I can't breathe," Jack rasped, tasting copper in his mouth. The medic grimaced but kept one steady hand on Jack's chest. Lightning flashed overhead, momentarily bleaching the world in white light. Jack saw gear and blood smeared nearby, and the medic's face in a spooky glare. Thunder cracked so loud it felt like it shook Jack's bones, and he winced against the pain. Rain poured down, drenching him. Water trickled into Jack's neck and mouth. The moist earth beneath him was freezing cold under his uniform. He was vaguely aware of more voices, shouting commands and curses through the storm. His ears rang. He struggled to focus, as reality twisted in and out of view. Then a second, distant explosion shook the ground beneath him. Jack felt the earth tremble through his body. He squeezed his eyes shut as more dirt and rain fell on his face. The medic shouted over the din, "We've lost half the squad back there!" The words were urgent and panic-tinged. Somehow Jack understood. They had lost their men, and he was still alive. The medic's grip on Jack's hand tightened. "We have to move fast," he called, voice cracking with emotion. Jack pressed his fingers back into the medic's as tightly as he could. He was fighting to stay alive, every breath a battle. A second voice boomed above the howling rain. "No! We stay! We save him!" Jack recognized it immediately, the lieutenant's voice. Lieutenant Simon, Jack's best friend since basic training, burst through the mud toward him. His chestnut hair was plastered to his forehead, and his uniform streaked with blood. Simon threw himself beside Jack and slapped the medic's shoulder. "Carter, you're not dead!" Simon yelled, slapping Jack's good shoulder. "I'm not leaving you here!" Behind Simon, a tall, stern officer moved quickly into the clearing. The man's face was set, lips tight. "Lieutenant!" the officer barked. "Orders from command. We have to pull out now. Carter's KIA, sir." Jack's heart froze at those words. KIA, killed in action, flashed like a warning in his mind. They believed he was dead. Simon's eyes blazed with anger and fear. He looked from the officer to Jack, a fire in his gaze. Jack coughed weakly, and Simon's hands gently cradled his head. "That's not true," Simon growled. "You're lying. Carter said we'd come home together. I won't leave him." He shook Jack gently. "Jack, stay with me. Don't you dare die on me now." The medic's voice cut through Simon's shouting. "Lieutenant, we have to move now. The enemy's closing in," he urged. "We can't stay, or we'll all be killed." Simon's jaw tightened. He looked down at Jack. Jack managed to lift his head a little and gave a weak, wet smile up at Simon. Blood and rain mixed on his face. "I'm right here," Jack whispered, though it was hard to hear. Simon's voice cracked as he promised, "I will get help, I swear it." He pressed Jack's hand fiercely. "Hold on, brother. I'm going to come back for you." Jack coughed again, a gurgling sound. He squeezed Simon's hand. Simon nodded, his mind made up. "Stay with me, Carter," he pleaded. "I'm coming." Simon stood up, boots splashing through the mud. "Hang on," he called once more, then charged off into the storm. Jack lay utterly still, listening to the sound of Simon's retreating footsteps. Every breath felt heavier now as the world faded at the edges. He was alone under the black sky, trembling in the rain. Alone again, Jack drifted between pain and unconsciousness. The rain poured down, masking his sobs. His mind was drifting. He could hear distant voices, two figures talking in low voices beyond the clearing. He caught one faint phrase, "We'll start the memorial at dawn." Jack's breath caught in his throat. Was he dreaming? He tried to call out, to tell them he was alive, but his lips wouldn't move. Darkness crept in at the corners of his vision. "No, this can't be real," he thought, panic rising. The last thing Jack Carter heard was the cold promise of a memorial and Simon's fading footsteps. Then the blackness claimed him. Before the dawn, Jack Carter sat on the edge of his bed in his old farmhouse bedroom, everything familiar and warm under the glow of a single lamp. On the nightstand, a framed photo showed Jack with his late father, both in clean uniforms, smiling and proud. Jack traced the edge of the photo, feeling a warm breeze drift through the open window from the early spring morning outside. The sky was still deep navy, with only a faint glow on the horizon. Around him lay the things he would need for the next day. His pack, a dog tag shining on the floor, and a small wooden box with letters he had written. His dog, a scruffy golden retriever named Jasper, let out a low bark in the hallway. "Jasper, boy," Jack whispered softly, scratching behind the dog's ear. "I wish you could come with me." Jack paused. He could hear the distant morning song of a mockingbird outside. In the mirror over his dresser, Jack saw his own reflection. Hazel eyes and dark hair, almost like his father's, and a worn patch of dust from the uniform he had just laid out. He smiled weakly, tugging at his jacket, which still hung crisp and new on a chair. The patch on the jacket bore the badge of his unit. Tomorrow, he would really be wearing this for the first time in action. There was a soft knock, and Jack's mother, Mary Carter, appeared in the doorway. Her hair was tied back, and worry lined her face. She held a steaming mug of coffee. "Jack," she said quietly, stepping into the room. "It's still dark out. Early bird, aren't you?" Jack nodded and took the coffee. its warmth calm against his trembling fingers. "Couldn't sleep," he admitted. "Thought I'd get a head start." Mary sat on the edge of the bed. Her eyes glistened with tears, but she tried to smile. She passed him a small charm on a chain, a silver compass. "Your father gave this to me," she said, voice trembling. "Now it's yours. He always said it would guide you home. Promise me you'll hold on to it." Jack took the compass and wrapped it gently around his wrist. He felt a lump in his throat and swallowed it down. "I promise," he said softly. He hugged his mother tightly, feeling her thin arms tremble around him. Jasper padded into the room, sensing something. Jack gently patted the dog's head. "Be good, buddy. See you soon," he said, scratching Jasper's ears. Jack stood and hoisted his backpack. Dawn would soon break. "Time to go," he murmured, stepping outside onto the quiet porch. Cool morning air filled his lungs, and he watched his mother wave from the doorway. The field stretched out in front of him, covered in a thin mist. As Jack walked away down the dusty path, he felt the rising sun warm his face. Behind him, his mother remained at the door, a single tear rolling down her cheek. He gave a small, reassuring smile and raised his hand in farewell. Then he turned and took his first step into the new day. By midday, Jack arrived at the meeting spot he and Anna had chosen. A single oak tree stood next to a small creek by the side of the road. Anna Jackson, his childhood friend and sweetheart, was already there, sitting on a log. Morning dew glistened on the grass as sunlight filtered through the leaves. When she saw him, Anna ran forward and hugged him fiercely. Her dark hair was damp with mist, and her eyes shone. "Jack," she cried softly, holding him. Jack held her close. "Anna, he started, but the lump in his throat stopped him. He buried his face against her shoulder, breathing in her familiar scent. Anna pulled back and looked into his eyes. "You promised you'd come back to me, remember?" she said, voice trembling. "You have to promise again. Don't ever break that promise." Jack brushed her tears away with his thumb. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, forcing a smile. "I'll be back before you know it. We had plans, Anna. We'll do all of that." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small folded paper, the old map they had drawn together, with X's marking their dream road trip, and a pressed wildflower they picked last summer. Anna's eyes widened. "You kept it," she whispered. "I did," Jack said softly, tucking the map back. Anna hugged him one more time. Behind them, a rooster crowed somewhere in the nearby farmyard. Jack watched her tears fall as he stepped away. "Stay safe," she called quietly as he walked toward the small airfield up the road. "I will," he shouted back over his shoulder. "I love you, Anna." He blew her a kiss, and Anna caught it in her heart. Later that day, at the dusty county airstrip, Jack and Simon met again. The morning sun had brightened the sky as soldiers gathered around. Simon grinned when he saw Jack approaching with his pack and helmet. "There you are," he exclaimed, clapping Jack on the back. Jack grinned, giving Simon a quick hug. They adjusted each other's gear. Simon teased Jack about drinking too much coffee that morning. "You'll have us bouncing off the clouds," and Jack elbowed him lightly. Nearby, the tall and lanky Private Daniels was tying up his boots, jokes and laughter echoing from their basic training days. Jack remembered how they all had promised to look out for each other. Suddenly, a sergeant stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Men, listen up!" The chatter ceased. A bright flag fluttered on a pole. Captain Marshall, a tough but fair man, announced, "We have a long flight ahead. Final checks in 10 minutes." Jack took a deep breath. This was really happening. He glanced at Simon, who gave him a thumbs up. Jack tightened his pack straps. He placed the silver compass back on his wrist. Soon it would guide him through real danger. He tried to swallow the lump in his throat. They climbed aboard the military transport plane, helmets on, hearts pounding. As Jack settled into his seat, he looked out the open door at the town one last time. His mother's waving figure was tiny below, Anna's tearful face looking up. Jack waved and managed to smile. "We'll see each other soon," he promised Anna again silently. The plane took off with a roar, and Jack's world began to move, carrying him to the unknown. The jungle was thick with heat and tension as Jack and his squad patrolled the outskirts of a small village. Tall palms towered above, making patchy light on the moist ground. Birds flew screeching overhead. Jack wiped sweat from his brow. Beside him, Simon kept close, rifle ready, eyes sharp. The trees around them were silent but for the rustle of their boots on fallen leaves. The sergeant whispered, "Keep your eyes open." Every sound seemed loud. A branch snapping underfoot, insects buzzing near Jack's ear. Jack's heart thumped. He thought of Anna and his mother with every step, fighting to keep calm. Suddenly, 3 sharp reports rang out. The squad dropped to the ground instantly. Bullets whipped through the jungle, ricocheting off trees. Jack peeked over the leafy brush. Sergeant Miller was hit in the leg. He cried out in pain. One of the men dived to shield him with his own body. Another shouted, "Medic!" A figure in camo dashed forward. Jack felt a surge of adrenaline. He rolled out and fired his rifle into the brush to cover the rescue. The medic knelt by Miller's side, checking the wound. Jack's hand trembled on his rifle. He crawled a bit closer. "Hang on, Sergeant," he whispered, pouring all his will into staying calm. Simon leaned in beside Miller, clasping his shoulder. The enemy's sounds echoed all around them. Then a cry came from the jungle's edge. "Fall back! Now!" The squad scrambled out of the ambush as quickly as they could, carrying Miller with them. Jack fired one more shot at a rustling shadow, but it vanished into the trees. They retreated. Panting and shaken, Jack kept low. Miller groaned weakly as Simon and the medic tended to him. Jack realized how close they had come to losing him. The jungle behind them seemed very still now, as if the leaves were holding their breath. Simon patted Jack on the back. "Good cover fire, man," he said quietly. Jack managed a nod. Inside, his stomach churned and his hands still shook. Night fell as they made camp again inside an old brick building. Jack cleaned his rifle in the dim light. Outside, crickets chirped. He sat on a stone step, thinking of Miller's terrified eyes. He remembered vowing never to leave anyone behind. Now Miller depended on them. Jack pressed the silver compass on his wrist, feeling its cool metal. He closed his eyes and made a silent promise. "We'll come home together." That evening, Jack returned to camp under a golden sunset. The squad settled in what remained of a church building. Cots were set up on dusty floors. Jack saw Simon tying an extra bandage on his side where he had scraped against coral earlier. Jack told Simon he was glad they had each other's backs out there. Nearby, soldiers gathered by a flickering lantern. Lieutenant Harris stood up to speak. "Men, listen up," he said firmly. Jack and Simon sat up. The lieutenant announced their next mission. At dawn, a small reconnaissance team would move deeper into the jungle to scout the enemy's position. Jack's stomach tightened. Tomorrow morning would be dangerous. Later, Jack couldn't sleep in the quiet darkness. He took out a notebook and scribbled a quick note by candlelight. Run away together. Love, Jack. He folded it and placed it in the wooden box where he had kept letters from home and pressed a wildflower Anna had given him. Outside, rain began to patter on the roof. Jack hugged his knees, listening to the storm growl. Fear and hope swirled inside him. He reached into his shirt and fingered the silver compass, whispering, "I'll make it back." Eventually exhaustion won, and Jack drifted to sleep, dreaming of Anna under rain-lit skies. Jack woke with a start just as dawn light filtered through the trees. He coughed up a mouthful of sand and rainwater. His chest hurt, but he was alive. He pushed himself up on one arm and looked around. The clearing was littered with spent casings and footprints. He remembered falling asleep from exhaustion. Now he was alone. "Simon?" he croaked, but only bird calls answered. Pain shot through his body as he tried to move. Everything hurt. Ribs, shoulder, head. On his right side was a torn, blood-soaked cloth from the medic's bandage. Next to him lay his empty rifle and an open med kit. Jack grimaced but managed to drink from a half-full canteen and splash cold stream water on his face. It stung, but it felt good. He sat up slowly. His legs shook, but he pushed himself over logs and rocks in the clearing. The jungle around him was cool now, draped in dawn mist. Jack realized he had to get help, for himself and for Sergeant Miller, if he was still alive. He examined the compass on his wrist. It pointed only to the sky, but to Jack, it meant home. With difficulty, Jack stood. He grabbed a long forked branch from the ground for support. Each step sent pain through his ribs, but he forced himself onward. The game trail he'd crawled out from led into denser jungle. Jack followed it. The heat returned as the sun rose higher. He trudged for hours through vines and ferns, calling out Simon's name between gasps of breath. Sometimes a distant bird would scream back in a jarring echo. Jack ignored hunger and dizziness. Survival was all that mattered. At last, Jack broke into another small clearing. He paused, spotting faint footprints in the mud. They looked like boot prints, maybe the patrol Simon promised. Jack's heart raced. He called weakly, "Simon!" His voice cracked. Silence answered. Jack took a deep breath. Somewhere out there was Simon, and he had to make it to him. Jack pressed forward with every ounce of will he had. The jungle grew darker under thick leaves. Suddenly, he heard something familiar, a faint shout. "Jack! Jack!" He turned his head slowly and saw a figure running through the underbrush. "Simon!" Jack cried as Simon burst into the clearing. Relief washed over him. Simon's face was filled with tears and joy. "We thought you were gone, man!" Simon yelled, kneeling beside him. Jack's throat tightened. He could only smile weakly. Before Jack could speak, a medic from their patrol arrived, followed by 2 soldiers. Strong arms lifted Jack gently. "You're safe now," the medic said. Jack felt warm relief. Simon held Jack's arm. "They said, we already started your funeral," he began, eyes wide. Jack squeezed Simon's hand, too weak to answer. He was alive, truly alive, and being carried out of the nightmare of the jungle at last. Jack blinked awake in a small aid station tent back at base camp. Bright daylight streamed through canvas walls. His body still ached, but he was out of danger. He saw Simon kneeling beside his cot, a tired grin on his face. Relief flooded Jack. He attempted to sit up. "Easy there," a medic said kindly, patting Jack's shoulder. Jack managed to smile. His mother's compass lay on the tray next to him. The doctor checked his ribs and head wound. "You're going to be fine," he assured Jack. Outside, rain began to patter again. Through the flap, Jack saw other soldiers walking on the base. This was the highest place he had been in days. Simon patted Jack's hand. "Told you I'd get you," he whispered, choking back emotion. Jack nodded gratefully. Around them, other wounded soldiers rested. Jack felt a surge of gratitude. He had survived to see this day. That evening, Jack, Simon, and Miller, who was now stabilized in a chair beside Jack's cot, quietly celebrated with sandwiches and water. Jack took a small bite, marveling at how normal it felt to eat. Simon clasped Jack's shoulder. "We both made it," he said softly. Jack grinned. "Yeah, and Miller here too." Miller let out a weak thumbs up. The storm outside eased, and the air felt warm and calm. Jack closed his eyes, feeling thankful and determined to never take morning for granted again. A week later, Jack stood on the tarmac next to Simon as a transport plane roared for takeoff. The engines thrummed beneath their feet. Jack felt the silver compass on his wrist, now a promise rather than a charm. He turned and saw townspeople who had gathered to welcome their hero. Then he spotted Anna's yellow dress in the crowd. The plane's wheels lifted off. Jack pressed his forehead against the glass, watching the village recede. Simon gave him a proud salute and shouted, "Come back soon!" Jack smiled and saluted back as the plane banked toward home. Back on home soil under a bright blue sky, Jack and Simon walked down the aisle of a small ceremony. Crowds cheered and an American flag fluttered in the breeze. Jack's mother and Anna rushed forward. Jack hugged them both tightly. "I'm home," he whispered. That afternoon, Jack sat on the porch steps with his family, Jasper at his feet. He sipped lemonade with Anna by his side. Simon and Miller were there too, laughing with Jack's parents. Laughter and music filled the air. The war felt far away now. Jack realized how much he had changed. The boy who left was gone, replaced by someone who cherished every heartbeat. Above them, stars began to twinkle. Jack smiled at Anna and whispered, "We did it." Jack Carter felt the warm sun on his face as he stepped off the plane onto home soil. Reporters shouted questions, but Jack looked only for Anna and his family. He spotted them near a banner that read, "Welcome home." Their faces were full of hope and concern. Jack pushed through the crowd and was swept up in Anna's arms. "I'm here," he smiled, his voice thick. Later, Jack sat on his front porch with Anna, his mother, and Simon as the sun set in brilliant orange. Jasper barked happily nearby. They passed around a photo album. Jack's mother said quietly, "The town held a service, Jack, until they heard you were alive." Jack nodded, feeling a mix of wonder and relief. Simon raised his bottle of lemonade. To Captain Carter, he toasted. Everyone cheered and clinked their glasses. Jack felt overwhelmed by love and gratitude. He looked at the silver compass on his wrist. It had truly guided him home. That night, Jack lay in his own bed, holding Anna's hand. Outside, a gentle rain began again, but here he felt safe and calm. He realized this was a new beginning. Tomorrow he would wake up alive in a world that had already planned his goodbye, and that thought made him smile. He whispered into the quiet night, "I am home." A week later, the morning sun lit up a small church decorated with black ribbons and flags at half-mast. Chairs were arranged for Jack's memorial. Family and friends gathered inside, grief on their faces. There was a closed casket at the front beneath a portrait of Jack smiling in uniform. A hush fell over the crowd when the door opened. Jack stepped into the sanctuary, crutches under his arms, dusty uniform with a few metal stripes. Gasps rippled through the crowd. His mother stumbled forward in shock. Anna's eyes flew open wide. People whispered, "Is that him? He's alive!" For a moment, no one could speak. Jack stood by the podium where a folded flag rested. The pastor began. Jack Carter was a brave soul. The pastor froze. Then Jack cleared his throat. The funeral never happened, Jack announced softly, because I'm still alive. A stunned silence broke into shouts and tears of joy. Anna rushed forward and threw her arms around Jack's legs. His mother wept and held him tightly. Soldiers and townspeople pushed forward, crowding around him, sobbing and cheering. Simon lifted Jack from the floor into a bear hug. Jack felt a warmth so powerful he thought he might melt. People around the room were clapping and laughing through tears. Jack wiped his eyes and looked around. He was alive. He had made it. He then gently stepped away and touched the casket's cloth. The plan was changed. This service would become a celebration of life. Jack raised his arm. "Can I say something?" he said. The crowd quieted instantly. Jack took a breath. "I just want to thank you all," he began. His voice was steady despite the emotion in the room. "Thank you for believing in me." The room burst into applause. Anna and his mother nodded through their tears. Simon gave a proud thumbs up. Jack smiled at them and said softly, "Let's go home." The people cheered wildly. Outside, the bright sun felt like a new dawn. As Jack walked out of the church, surrounded by those who loved him, he felt lighter than he had in a long time. Jack Carter felt the morning sun on his face as he stepped into his own front yard. A small group had gathered by the maple tree, friends, neighbors, and veterans, to help clear away the flowers that had been at his headstone a week ago. Anna stood smiling beside him, looking radiant in a blue dress. Simon limped over with Miller on his arm. Jack was home for good, the nightmare behind him. He realized how much he had changed. The boy who left this house had returned as a man who had survived and would cherish every second. Jack looked at the silver compass on his wrist, the gift that guided him home, and smiled. That afternoon, Jack and Anna sat on the porch with old Mr. Daniels, sharing lemonade. Simon and Miller joined them, laughing about rebuilding a broken fence. Jack told stories of the jungle in gentle tones, the way he'd promised, making them feel like adventure tales. Everyone listened, relieved and happy that Jack was alive. Suddenly Jack said, "I found our old map." He unfolded it and traced the route they had dreamed of. Anna laughed and squeezed his hand. "Let's finally take that trip." Jack grinned. Anna's eyes filled with joyful tears. A week later, under the bright spring sun, Jack and Anna stood beneath the old oak tree where they had said goodbye. The same church they had filled for his funeral was now blooming with flowers for another reason. Jack looked at Anna with pride. Simon stood by with Miller and the others. The church bell rang out, but this time it was for a celebration. As Jack said his vows to Anna, he glanced at Simon, his brother in arms, who stood smiling as best man. It wasn't the future he had planned, but now everything felt right. Afterwards, at the reception, Jack made an unexpected announcement. "I've decided to run for town office," he said, raising his glass with Anna by his side. Confused whispers turned to cheers. Jack smiled. "I want to help make sure every veteran has the homecoming and support they deserve," he explained. His family and friends applauded his new purpose. Jack Carter had become living proof that hope, love, and determination could triumph over despair. Under the rising moon, as Jack gazed at the starry sky and Anna in his arms, he whispered, "I am home." And at that moment, the world finally felt right again.